Welcome back, everybody. Today we're starting chapter 32, which in Hebrew is Lamed Beis, which is Lev, which is the heart. And this is the heart of the entire book, the holy book that we're learning. This captures it basically starts in chapter 10 and now is the completion of that understanding. Well, actually, we're going to summarize next week, but this is the higher unity. The higher unity, the mitzvah of the oneness of God, to connect everything to God's oneness, which comes from the verse, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one." So what exactly do we need to do with this commandment? We need to connect everything to God's oneness. Well, there's two parts to that. There's the higher oneness and the lower oneness. The higher oneness is showing how the emotions of God don't really add to the oneness of God. It's still all oneness. It's still all the oneness of God. So this chapter is chapter 32, which is the heart, is the Lev, is the heart. So what happens in the heart of the world of Atzilus, the world of divinity, connects directly to God's essence. It's not an addition. And we're going to use the metaphor of a human being, that what's in a person's lungs right before they speak, the feelings that they have in their lungs, connects directly to the essence of what they want. Even though it has to go through so many stages before it gets about to be spoken, the spoken word, the emotions directly connect to the essence of the human. So too, what God is about to say and what he says, that's what makes the reality, because we are all words of God. We are all like inside a brain that's thinking words. So thinking those words creates, like in imagination, creates a world. So that's where we're being created by God speaking inside himself. We're all words of God. Everything is words of God. So the idea of the higher oneness is before God even speaks, the emotions that are going to motivate that speech are connected directly to the essence and oneness of God, and they don't add to or take away or change God in any way at all. They connect to his essence. So we're really learning the heart of this commandment in this chapter. So let's start reading inside. While we're waiting to open up the chapter, I just want to say something really interesting. From the military armies, we can learn how to be an army of God, how to serve God, how to make ourselves better. So I heard from a colonel that studied this, is that his conclusion was from analyzing the data, that the difficulty in mental health that we've experienced in this last century, and especially in the latest times, is directly connected with electricity. Well, how so? Because people before electricity, they didn't have so many mental health issues. Because they had sleep, because there wasn't much to do after the sun goes down. It was very uncomfortable to read by those candle lights. So people just used to go to sleep and wake up at dawn or before dawn. And that gave the restoration necessary to the brain. So most difficult challenges are, the brain will actually figure out a way to deal with them itself if it is given sleep. And this colonel proved that battle, post-traumatic stress disorder, and psychological battle problems happened in wars where the soldiers were not able to sleep. And in fact, 98% of the soldiers became psychologically damaged if they had a constant war that continued, constant battle that continued for weeks on end. And when in battles where the soldiers were able to sleep, the brain corrected itself and the person didn't have psychological problems. So that's so important to understand, that God created us in a way that we do self-correct and we do fix ourselves up. We just need to have the emotional fortitude to take that step and turn off that computer, turn off that cell phone, turn off the electricity, and get your sleep and get up early. And a lot of problems, stress problems, will correct by themselves. It's so simple. Okay, so Rabbi Smith, can we take up, look at chapter 32?
Sure, thank you for sharing that. And I just want to mention, I heard that quoted in the name of Thomas Edison, who is credited with inventing the mass-produced light bulb, that he said now they could get rid of this useless thing called sleep, because people would have electricity all night and they would not need to sleep anymore. So it's interesting, if that's true, and I don't know firsthand, but that kind of a dismissiveness to sleep was actually part of the invention of the mass-produced light bulb.
Well, it's true. People stopped sleeping.
Right.
But to correlate that directly with the mental health, and prove it, this kernel proved it from battle experience and battle research. It's pretty amazing, because that gives a lot of hope to people that all they need to do is to correct that. That's the first thing they need to do, is correct their sleep. And the most protective thing you could do for the stressful times that we're living in now of uncertainty is turn off the computer, turn off the electricity, and go to sleep and wake up early.
Right, turn off that phone. Turn off that phone. If your person just would limit their reading of WhatsApp to 1 hour a day, their life would be much easier. And also teaches us compassion on people who are experiencing the mental health effects of sleep deprivation, is to be compassionate on them, because they're just having a natural outcome of the sleep deprivation. And if we just get them a little vacation in a quiet place with the curtains closed, a few days of rest could make a big difference in every person's life.
Without even therapy, just the natural God created people that they're going to correct by themselves.
Right, exactly. Beautiful, beautiful. We should create a sleep pods, something like that. People just go, they could sleep, check out, no noise, no phones, nothing, no kids to keep them awake. And that's really, by the way, postpartum depression is mostly sleep deprivation also. Because in the old days, women had a mother around, a grandmother, a sister, multiple sisters, cousins, nieces to take care of the baby. There was no such thing as not being able to take a nap. There was people around that lived in these family units. The whole town was 1 or 2, 3, 4 families. And now, unfortunately, people are so isolated. They don't have any relatives nearby. They don't have a mother. They don't have grandparents. They don't have sisters, cousins, nieces, and everyone's operating on their own. And I think that that's one of the great things that we need to take on in terms of the things that we've talked about that need to be properly addressed, that Rabbanim need to properly address, is Rabbanim are acting in a reactive way. So someone comes with a question, they're going out of their mind, what should they do? The answer is the Rabbanim need to see that they need to establish organizations that they come in the middle of the day, they take the girls out of school instead of this insane drive to try to replicate the mass production schooling system of the secular world. The girls in the afternoon should be at home helping their mothers, letting them rest. If the girls should be going to young mothers who don't have any older girls to come home and help, and just to give them 2-3 hours in the afternoon to rest. And that would stabilize the issues in mental health issues, and would stabilize the issues in postpartum depression. It would rejuvenate people's families, the health of the family, the marriage, the children. We rejuvenate just from a simple readjustment of priorities.
Right, just to do things what used to work in previous times, because you actually don't have a record of mental health problems, so many from before electricity. And in fact, the first hospital for mental health was created during uh, the war of 18 um, 62, 63 in the United States. That's the first time they needed mental health for the
Oh, in
soldiers.
in the Civil War, you mean?
The Civil War, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And but in the Civil War, that was the first time that they also had nonstop. They started to have nonstop battles.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So insightful, and it's something urgently we need to implement. We need to make a
Yeah, right.
call.
So it's something that's unnecessary. It's something that people don't need to have. They just
What?
need to go back to certain behaviors that worked for humanity for thousands of years.
It's just so interesting that you're saying that, because on the Emunah Faith and Action share that we had this afternoon, the rabbismith.org. So we had this Emunah class. So one of the people I was talking about, Menuchas Nefesh, serenity of the soul, and I was reading from the from Chavis Levavos, Duties of the Heart, where he says that a person who has betochen, who has trust in God Almighty, is exempt from servitude to the king, exempt from the king's laws, and exempt from the subjugation of his other people. And so I was pointing out that if you have betochen, then the governor can put in whatever mandates he wants in place, and they don't apply to the man who has faith in God. That it's not that he doesn't have to fight against the mandates. He doesn't have to resist the mandates. They don't apply to him in the first place. So someone raised the question, well, okay, that's thank you very much, Rabbi. But what about if there's going to be this cyber war attack on the United States, and it's going to turn off all the power? You know what? Like implying and raising that's a real threat. That's a real issue. Like not wearing a mask. Okay, big deal. But what about if all the power goes out? So I suggested, listen, why don't you think about what that means if we don't have power? Number one is we're going to have no television, and the control over people's minds will be dissipated. In fact, I told them, I said, I don't even think that there's really a real threat of cyber warfare, except for intimidation tactics, but no real shut off. You know why? Because if they shut off the electricity, they wouldn't be able to control people's minds anymore. Everyone would be sitting around. They get together with their neighbors. They have a conversation. People would connect with each other. They come out of their houses in the daytime, and they wouldn't be traveling long distances because would be no fuel, because all the oil gas pumps run on electricity. People will be figuring out different ways to work. They'd figure out different ways to make income and produce food. And we return to a very, very much simpler life, be much greater calm and productivity, actually. And so what are we afraid of?
In fact, people would sleep because it wouldn't make sense to stay up. There's no electricity. So
Right.
the mental health problems would go away. Now, mentally, they could deal with each other because they're sleeping enough. Now they just need to figure out how to put boats down the river to bring supplies. That's it.
That's right. And I pointed out the contrast between the 1970s. There was a power outage in New York City, and there was a baby boom 9 months later. And when everyone was forced to stay home from coronavirus, this COVID tyranny, then it was the opposite. There was actually a drop in the birth rate, significant drop in births. So what was the difference? The difference was that in the first instance, in the 1970s, when electricity went out, there was no television. So the lights were out, no television. What do people do? When they're not busy watching what some deranged person in some movie studio came up with to try to poison people's minds with, then they have natural thoughts of affection and love and bring children into the world. If you leave people at home and they're forced to watch the terrible news, constant warfare against their minds, and constant psychological distress of the announcements, and they had all those numbers in the bottom, the number of cases going up and up and up and up, and the number of deaths, and the cumulative, they did it cumulative, so there's no rest. There was never a rest. There could have been no deaths for a week. And then they say, but the cumulative death rate is the number of deaths is this, going back for a year and a half already. It was an insane psychological warfare to drain people. And the end result is people do not have the ability to be loving and affectionate in those circumstances. They're just exhausted and strained and stretched to a point of really just going into a place of withdrawal from intimacy. So that's unfortunately what happened. And now we could just it supports what we're talking about over here, that this use of electricity is actually really, really detrimental. And if you go to Amish communities, it's really remarkable. You see, especially in like the summer, in the fall and late summer and the fall, and when the days are getting shorter, 7 o'clock at night, every light in the house is dark. People are sleeping because they don't have electricity. They have these little gas lamps. Maybe you see one lamp in the living room. Maybe someone's reading a book or a Bible or something like that, and then they're off to bed and go to sleep. And it's a blessed life. And
they have much less. People are wondering, why do they have the much better statistics of mental health?
Right.
This is a simple answer. They don't have electricity.
They don't have electricity. They're sleeping, and they're not exposed to the mental distress that was being pushed on us.
Now, even if people had mental stress, if they would sleep enough, that this colonel was saying, even if this person has stress, they go into battle. But if they have time to rest, the body will still recalibrate itself, even under stress. But if the soldier doesn't have a chance between battle and battle to rest, then 98% will eventually psychologically break down.
That's right. I suggest that the enemies of peace are the ones writing a lot of these news stories about the coming doomsday and the coming collapse and the coming starvation, the coming inflation and the coming cyber power. That who's going to sit and write those articles? The Soviets, the Soviet intelligence services, we're going to write those just to keep everyone completely in the state of distress. They go wear down America. If you read Sun Tzu's The Art of War, which I'm just rereading now in preparation for a presentation I'm making, he says so. I mean, it says that the chokhmah of the wisdom that this non-Jew had. He says over here, supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. If you could get people exhausted, if you could get people to be worn out from the emotional tiredness and the physical tiredness, they're not able to fight. They can't even see. Their eyes are blurred. They can't see where the enemy is. They're scared of the radiation here. They're scared of the air over here. They're scared of the guy over there in the white coat. They're scared of the government. They're scared of the troops that they imagine are coming in all kinds of different directions. They're totally left. God should save us, without even firing a shot. The people are in such a state of disarray and disassemblement from basic discipline. They're not competent they have no resistance. Right. So the best thing, if you were a Soviet general or a Chinese general and you said, how can you defeat the United States? You put in the newspaper, Chinese army coming in, but you wouldn't say they're coming in 5 minutes. You say they're coming in 6 weeks. The Chinese army is going to invade. They're moving troops. They're going to move the Navy to the United States coast, and the Soviets are going to invade this. And then everyone would be like 6 weeks of mental stress. By the time they would march in, everyone would be lying on the ground, like just totally, jelly. That's how they could defeat the people, by telling everyone what they're going to do. They're able to break the resistance. That's the strategy of deception that people don't even understand, how they're being wound up tighter and tighter and tighter to the point that they no longer can function with basic common sense. And you and I see that we get these reports, this ingredient and this and that thing, and you start reading this stuff and you realize the person who's spreading this is spreading falsehood just to confuse people, because it's so obviously false. You don't even need a scientific background to see that this is false information meant to drive everyone's adrenaline, cortisol, and make people stay awake, worried, unable to sleep. That's what they're doing now with the war. the alleged war and that they're manufacturing in Europe, trying to just keep people in a constant state of distress, displace people, move people around, keep people on their toes. That's the psychological warfare. Just the exhausting of people is a tactical move, regardless of which way they're moving. It doesn't matter. It just matters that people are being worn down.
So it's very interesting because I looked up from the Maral from Prague. It says that what do people need to do to avoid Chevlei Mashiach, not to be not to be damaged by the birth pangs of Mashiach, which we apparently are experiencing now. So he says something very interesting is that what's the problem is we're going through a transformation, a shinui, a change. Changes are not good. And if you look, the day which the word toiv, good, is missing is on the second day of the week, which is Yom HaSheni. Yom HaSheni, Sheni is like shinui, like change, the day of change. And good is there. So what do we need to do to avoid this is we need to connect with not change, but with toiv, because toiv is missing, good. It says, what are the two things that are toiv? Being Isaac in Torah, being busy in Torah, and being busy in Gemlias Chasadim, kindness to others. That means lending people, giving people food, visiting sick people, helping, giving a helping hand. So, because if we're going to connect our mind to things that are toiv, that are good, the study of Torah and the study and the acts of kindness, then we are basically mentally going above the changes. We're like ignoring the changes that are happening,
right?
And just connecting those things. So
right,
it's basically a psychological pain, the birth of Mashiach. We can avoid it.
It's so beautiful what you're saying, and that's why the war of the public health war was against Gemilas Chosadim. No visiting the elderly, no visiting the sick, no visiting family members, no kibbud avim, no hachnasas orchim, no honoring your mother and father, no gathering, bringing in no bringing in guests for Shabbos, no bringing in guests for the Passover Seder. That was the war. The war was to break the acts of kindness and to break the Torah study, to close down the yeshivas. They made war on these two things because that they want to bring the Jews into the Chevlei Mashiach. They want to bring Jews into the chaos and the trauma. And one of the things that people lose sight of in all of this, and I have a theory, and I have no way to prove this, but I'm going to float a theory over here. When you meet Holocaust survivors, you have Holocaust survivors that are very upbeat, joyous people, rebuilt families, joyful families, happy families. They themselves lost their entire families in the war, and maybe they were kids or they were young teenagers, and they rebuilt everything. Sometimes they were older people, lost their family, rebuilt their family, and they have joyous families. You have other people that came out of the Holocaust very, very bitter, very angry, and they went through hell and they went through terrible things. And I'm not in any way judging them, but my theory is that the people who came out joyous went in joyous. They came from happy, warm, bright families, loving families, joyous families. And what happened was there was like a major windstorm that was knocked over, destroyed, but that's what they related back to, and that's the way they modeled their lives afterwards. Other people, I believe that there were people who, not everyone had a rosy life, happy life. Not everyone was on the right emotional gradient at the time before the war either. They could be religious, but they were not necessarily happy, joyous people. And that was already ingrained. So why would someone want to go back to that? Meaning to say it was bad enough what was before the war. It wasn't necessarily a happy environment, a joyous Leibedic place. And then it was destroyed. And now they're going to just go after whatever the current things. Now, that's only a theory. I have no way to prove that. But what I use that for is to say to people now, what's your main priority? Your main priority is Pruvu. It's bringing more children into the world. That's your obligation. And the obligation is carried out not only in having your own children, but you have to make sure your children marry and have children. So the most important thing is to show them a happy family that is going to become menuchas and nefesh, that they're going to aspire for that. It's not about the details of the mitzvahs as much as it is the experience of the warmth of the home, that then they're going to say, you know what, I want to go out and endure all the trials and tribulations of marriage and child raising because I see and I want to emulate what's really possible. And that, therefore, a person learns when they have that perspective, then you could be mevater on anything. Because when you're going to confront a situation in your family and you see people are not conducting themselves properly. Yes, do I have a responsibility to guide them in the right direction? Yes, it's my responsibility. Clearly, the Eibishter asked Abraham, why is your wife conducting herself this way? True, it's my responsibility. But what's the end goal over here? The end goal is to create generations and generations of people that are going to be so happy to run, to get married and bring more children into the world. So therefore, we have to say, okay, how am I going to speak to the person about this? How am I going to guide them in the right direction? How am I going to create a warm, loving environment the warmth and love will not be lost in the dikduk, in the exactitude of the performance of what the right thing to do is. Then you're creating an environment. So I say to people, like people come and argue, that say husband and wife are arguing, sometimes they argue over the vaccine. So they're afraid, one is afraid that they're going to, maybe there's a risk to childbirth for the, if the teenager is going to take it. So I say to them, listen, there's a greater risk that your children will not get married and have children from seeing your conflict than there is from the vaccine itself. For sure, we know that conflict and a conflicted family environment is going to bring stress for the children, that they're going to be resistant to get married. So that's your first priority. Once you create family harmony, and what I've discovered is all the people that are calling about the stress husband against wife, I always find out, I push a little bit and find out that it's actually been long-standing issues. It's coming to a head with the vaccine. So I said, listen, the vaccine is not an issue. It's not the issue. You need to work on what's the underlying, creating a beautiful, warm house. That's where the danger is from the outside influences. And what exactly happens with the vaccine? You should state your position lovingly. But at the end of the day, that pales in comparison to creating a loving, warm environment that your children will want to replicate and emulate. And that's where we got to get people on track.
Right. And especially also that really we found out that it was two diseases. It was a regular flu together with a allergic reaction. So what's an allergic reaction is the immune system is not calm. It's reacting to this spike protein, whatever it is, and it's overreacting because it's an allergic reaction. But what helped? Well, Benadryl helped, things that help out, but some people just calm down, and that stopped the allergic reaction. So if people take in this injection, which is going to be spike protein, it's like a temporary allergy therapy. So what's going to help the body not to have this bad reaction to the spike protein? Well, being calm. So a person's internal state can really, really help how this is going to affect the body.
Right. That's very important. Absolutely important. Be calm. And then you see how they spread stuff. They spread to disturb anyone from any angle. So guy didn't take the vaccine, but he's worried about the guy next to him who took the vaccine. He's walking around in an attitude of fear and feeling invaded because the guy next door, the guy who's sitting across from him, is allegedly going to send things into the air that are going to affect him. Who's sick over here? The person is sick because he's thinking that there's things in the air that are floating around, and now he's made himself sick.
No, even if there are, if he stays calm, his body shouldn't react to them like
right.
Like I'm saying, I know there's too much pollen over here in New York, and you start reacting. So, but if you calm down, if you breathe slowly, calm down. Even that I'm sensitive to pollen, I start being able to I get a clear nose because I calm down. I physically make myself breathe slowly, calm down, and my reaction is less to the pollen in the air.
There you go. Absolutely.
So
that's what we need to teach you. That's the real secret to health.
Right. A person's internal state, a person's sleep. that's how they're going to react to these allergens.
Yes. That's what we need to, that's why we have to connect everyone to the Eibishter, to Hashem, because to God Almighty, because that's the answer to all the problems. Meaning to say, it gives you the strength to turn off the phone. You start with Shabbos.
Oh, that's, yeah.
You start with Shabbos. At least you have 1/7 of the week is disconnected. And then if you can expand from there until you're disconnected from this constant trauma machine called the cell phone, you know, people are so particular. You have all these people that are natural health people. I'm not, I mean, they're natural. They worry about what the ingredients are and where the origin of the genetic, possibly genetically modified ingredient from 2,000 generations of oats or whatever it is ago, or 200 generations, whatever it is. And I say, one second, hold on a second. You're so careful about what you ingest and what's in the air, and you got air purifiers running in your house, and yet you are releasing into your body massive quantities on a consistent chronic basis of cortisols and adrenaline from your thinking about all the dangerous things that are going on in the world. So what's the real danger over here? It's not the genetically modified ingredient or organism. Whether the danger is not, that pales in comparison. Again, it pales in comparison to what a person is doing to himself with his own thinking. He's sending into overdrive these production centers that create these emergency response systems that the Eibishter, God Almighty, put into us for use in emergencies. And then our thinking creates 24 hours or maybe 16-hour or 17-hour a day emergencies. Well, what is the result of that? The result of that is that's direct ingestion into our bodies and bathing every single cell in our body with these things that are not meant to be swimming around in us 24 hours a day. So let's start there. And we can, you know, that's the first priority. That overrides everything else.
Yep. It says in the Gemara that how a person could be saved from the war of Gog and Magog. He says, eat 3 meals on Shabbos. Right? Our custom is the third meal doesn't need to be washing. It could be just tasting certain foods. But eat 3. So we see the idea of being restful and enjoying and appreciating what we have.
Right. That's beautiful. And the Tzemach Tzedek, in his response to a plague, in the early 1800s, he said one of his instructions to a community that wrote about how to respond to a plague was to eat pas shachris, to have a full bread and a filling meal in the morning. Meaning that's, you start your day, you have to stop to eat pas shachris. You have to stop, you have to sit down, you have to wash, you have to eat the meal, you have to bench. We're talking about a minimum of 15 minutes dedicated to the eating process. And then if you're gonna, now you've got bread, you got to start cooking something, and you can't, you know, what are you gonna have on it? Just butter? You got to, you know, it's a whole experience. So it's not just that it's good to strengthen your body with the food. It's you're bringing out the time aspect.
Right. To slow down. So we have a lot of practical things. We haven't even started learning, but we've discussed a lot of very simple, practical steps that people can take to make a big change in their lives.
Yes, that's what we're going to call it for the title of this shir. So let's get the message out there. This is, you know, what we're teaching here with the Sha'ar Yichud, the gate of oneness, is the getting our thinking straight. And then we need to figure out ways to encourage people. I mean, I would love to sit together with other Rabbanim and say, okay, we have to get the girls available to their mothers. It's insane, Rabbi Shimon. It's insane, the situation today. Think about it. The girls are in school from 8 or 8:30 in the morning till 5:30 or 6 at night. They come home, then they have homework. A lot of places, schools, like girls up to 1 or 2 in the morning, and they're doing play practice and this thing and that thing and schoolwork, and they're not available to their mothers. They're not available to help their families. They're not available to take care of their own health and own restfulness. They're learning terrible, terrible sleep deprivation patterns for the rest of their lives. And it's all considered okay just because the name Beis Yaakov is on it. or Beis Rivka. It's got a Jewish
Right.
name on it. It's
To-
nothing.
to
It's not a Jewish lifestyle.
to be able to have strength to be able to do something at home productive, a person, they shouldn't be working. It's like basically a 7-hour work day, whatever they have. 4 hours is max, then you still have strength to do other things.
Right.
It's
Well,
nice to go and learn and to meet other people, but afterwards you don't have any. They are exhausted. They can't do anything at home anymore because they're
right.
exhausted.
Right. Abolish the homework. Abolish the long days. And-
Homework should be abolished. Absolutely, it's long days, and you can't really work on the basic building blocks of life.
That's exactly right. And you see what happens as kids come out, they graduate high school, they graduate seminary, yeshiva, they have no experience in any practice. A lot of them have no experience in any practical skill in life. They can't change a tire, they can't cook an egg, they can't bake bread, they can't sew, they can't do any of these things because they were so busy with this adopting the secular standard of information acquisition. That's a secular idea. Torah does not believe in information acquisition. It believes in connecting with Hashem. Connecting with Hashem is connecting with the giver of the Torah. Like you said before, we have to connect with Torah and Gemilas Chasadim. You need to be both learning and taking. Gemilas Chasadim is taking care of yourself, helping your mother, helping your father, helping your siblings, helping your father do the lawn, helping your mother do the laundry, do the sewing, all these kind of things, giving her a nap, all this, doing the shopping, that's Gemilas Chasadim. And then you could extend from there to help other families. But that is the way it's supposed to look.
Right. And clean food. I mean, basic building blocks of food that have worked for thousands of years. People were strong and healthy. It's only when they had famines, that's when they got, sicknesses. But otherwise, if they had clean air and clean food and good food, they had enough of it. Of the basic foods, which were, in other words, foods that were foods 120 years ago, oils that were oils 120 years ago, that is food that should work today. But if it's something that was invented or made available after 120 years ago, we have to limit it. You can have it, have it here and there, but limit, that shouldn't be the staple.
Right. People were not eating bagels and these kind of things that 120 years ago. They weren't eating chocolate cake to the same degree, and they weren't eating all this stuff. And I have no problem. Like I agree with you 100%.
We can have those things. Just
we loved. I love ice cream and I love chocolate, but it's not a staple.
Right. It has basically anything that comes in a package probably did not exist 120 years ago. So that's probably it's not in the category of real food.
Right. Beautiful. I think that we got to publicize what we just discussed over here, because it's just something that would help so many people. It's just so simple. People have been taught that life is complex, and people have been taught that the solution to their complex problems is even more complex things. And the answer is life is very simple, and the solutions are all very simple. Everything we talked about over here is a simple solution. And we're talking about turning out the lights. We're talking about turning off the phone. We're talking about sitting for a proper meal, sitting about giving focus on love and warmth in a family. And that's so simple.
Breathing slower.
Yeah. Talking slower. Now we have this thing with, we can listen to WhatsApp messages and recordings at 2 times speed. And like our brain is working at like twice the speed of what it's meant to work at. It's like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
I know. I do that 2 times speed, but it's not the way to go.
Right. I was thinking about that because it says in this week's Torah portion, Vayikra, that the spaces were made for Hashem made spaces in his communications with Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, in order to give Moses, our teacher, the opportunity to process and digest what he had been told. And I'm starting to realize that when I get these messages and I'm like, hey, some people speak very slowly and I want to like speed it up, but there's some people I want to hear what they're saying and I want to hear the breathing. I want to hear the pauses. Some people that send me messages that are really profound. But, if it's just like I got a simple transactional issue, maybe it can go a little fast. But if I want to hear someone's talking about he's sending me a personal message. He's sending me an insight that he had that came to him from the Eibishter, God Almighty gave him an insight into the Torah, into the world, into our mission in the world. And he's taking the trouble to record it and send it to me. I'm like, I want to hear this at the real speed, because I want to hear the breathing. I want to hear the pauses. I want to really take in what he's delivering to me, what he's gifting me with, at the pace that I'm meant to receive it. And so I started actually slowing down and putting them with not speeding up messages, especially this type that I'm talking about, because I want my soul to be able to process it. I want my intellectual faculties and my emotional faculties to be able to digest these words of truth that are being shared with me. And so it's really, we can learn it from the Parsha.
It's so interesting, because that's what we're about to learn inside, is that the actual breathing is connected with the essence of the soul. If you really want to understand what the person's really saying, how it connects to the essence, then it's important to hear the pause and the breathing. And that's when we, not just the words, but those most external functions of the lungs when we're speaking, because that connects all the way to the essence.
That is so, I'm looking forward to learning that insight, because I have a voice teacher that I went to lessons to for singing lessons, and he's an opera singer, not a Jewish fellow, very, very profound man. And he trained a relative of mine who's a chazan, and he said to me that his teacher, and these people have a lot of wisdom about the brain, the breathing, the body, the posture. But real wisdom, like a havana, an understanding of the creation of our bodies and the spirituality of it. And he said his teacher so the first thing you have to learn in singing is the breathing, how to take a breath. And no more gulping for breath. He says his teacher taught him, you need to take every breath like you have something very important to say. Now think about that. Every breath, not just when I'm about to say the most important statement in certain conversations. No, every breath I'm breathing in order to, if I'm going to utter it, it has to be an important statement. So it goes right to your point about learning that the breathing, the pausing, there's no rush. And so you learn that the most important thing is taking the breath. If you're singing, the most important thing is the breathing. It's okay to skip a few beats and start the next stanza late if you need to be able to breathe, or let the other people sing until I get to take the breath that I want to take to be able to be ready for the next stanza. I don't have to keep up with everyone else. It's a completely different limud, a completely different way of understanding.
Well, let's do this part of Yichud Hashem. If God is speaking and He's creating the world, but we want to connect to Yichud Elah, the higher oneness, and the benefit of the higher oneness is that the clippers become nullified. There's no battle. So we can look at the pacing that God is giving. Just stop for a second and watch the pacing of nature. Watch the pacing even of a city. Just watch the pacing, because that pacing is going to connect us, not the objects, but the pacing is going to connect us to the Yichud Elah, to the higher oneness, because that connects all the way that's being expressed from the essence of God. So we need to pay attention to that, because naturally we don't necessarily pay attention to the pacing of the day. Look outside, look at the pacing of the day. What do you notice? Because that is deeper than the words themselves. The words are the objects of the world. Do you see anything different today from yesterday or the day before? That's a message. Now I guess we should now read it inside.
Thank you. I have nothing to say. That's so profound. It's only it merits total silence.
Yeah. Okay, Lamed Base, the heart. So this is the heart of the higher oneness. We've been waiting for this a long time. We've been learning for a long time to get to here. Now, after all this learning, after 32 chapters, 31 chapters, we can now understand the higher man. And the higher man is basically God, the essence of God, putting himself into presenting himself like a man, the Atzilus of the world of Atzilus, which is the world of divinity, where God expresses a personality in order that we could relate to him. Shalakise, and he's on the chair. So there's this higher man on the chair. It's not a real chair. It's a chair is the idea of a servant. Everything, it's like a chariot. Everything lower in the chair serves what's higher. So that's why it's called Adam Elyon, the higher man. Anything underneath the chair is a servant. It's serving the higher man. In Kabbalah, this is Zah, Zer Anpin, which means small faces. In other words, it's God's emotions the way they are in a very succinct, balanced manner where everything has its place and everything's organized. The Atzilus of the world of Atzilus, and this world gets its energy, and we've learned this before, from the three last spheres, the movement, the spheres of the three last spheres of Abba ve'ema, of the father and mother. In other words, in Atzilus, there's the father and mother, which is wisdom and comprehension and wisdom and comprehension, or insight and comprehension. That's the father and mother, Chochmah and Bina, and they have like you have on a radio, you have the transmitter that is going to deliver the information, what's being said. So that's the Nehid. That's the three last spheres of the delivery. So those delivery aspects of the father and mother feed Zah, feed the higher man, the Adam Elyon. V'yadu, and it's not true. Inyan b'chinas amidas, the Atzilus. The Zah is the emotions of Atzilus. Shu ikar v'sheresh lashpas mokel mokel l'chayei. He is the main, the source, the living root of the delivery of being of divine sustenance, being a source to the source of the life of the worlds. In other words, our life. Nevertheless, Zah of Atzilus is still the end of divinity. It's not considered a creation. Because we've said in the last few weeks that he and the energy and the vessels which limit the energy, it's all one. It's all one with the essence of God. Therefore, even the vessels of Zah, even the external aspects, there's beginning, middle, and end. So even the end aspects of the three lowest spheres, these are the spheres which connect with the outside world, or to implementing outside world, so to speak, the parent outside world. It's all considered the end of the infinite. It's all still considered infinity, and that's why this is part of the higher oneness. View advarim, and the explanation of the matter is we can understand this from analyzing our body. God created man in his own image, so therefore by understanding our structure and how we function, we can understand how God functions. It says in the verse in Genesis, "B'tzalmenu kudmusenu." He created us in His image. So therefore, by understanding ourselves, we can understand God. The Hineanu Reim, Benefesh Adam, we see in the soul of a man, Shebechinas Chayu Yechida Shebei, the two highest levels of his soul, Achai Yechida Shebei, which Chaya is outside of the body, envelops the body, and the Yechida is the essence of the man, but it stretches out as far as he can stretch his hand. Shebechinas Makipin Netzach Nefesh Ruach Neshama. These are the aspects of the soul which surround the internal aspects of the soul, of the nefesh, ruach, neshama. Nefesh is in the liver and the digestive system and the blood. Ruach is in the respiratory system. Neshama is in the brain. Now these two souls that are outside of the body, they are higher than being limited in vessels. That's why the brain is a vessel. It's not in the brain, it's around the brain. Now, these two souls that are outside of the body, they really correspond to a person's essential want and pleasure, sense of accomplishment. It's something that's very simple. It is connected with a person's essence, or at least it activates the essence. We said before that desire, pleasure, and want is not the essence, but it activates the essence. Hanikra maskil, even the most internal and source of intellect is called the maskil function. The maskil function means that it causes people to understand things. Shubachinas makiv dachaya, that aspect is connected still with the makiv dachaya, with the level of the soul which is outside of the body. Bilti mugbalim b'kli. It's not limited in a vessel, klal, at all. Only from inside and below, it actually has a vessel in the physical body of a human. This is the neshama, is inside the brain. And the wind is in the heart and the respiratory system. Nevertheless, Meir Aramakif, the Rotza in the Tainug, the light that is around the human's body, which it corresponds to his want and his pleasure, the internal aspect of insight, that comes and feeds the three aspects of his soul, called nefesh, ruach, neshama, begimel kelim, in the three vessels. So a live person is an active vessel. Meicha v'liba, the brain, for the neshama, v'liba, the heart holds the ruach, etc. Minahelam, and it basically is hidden outside of the body, and when there's a vessel, it reveals its function. For example, the want now transforms itself, and it's now intellect. V'tam goloi, and it's an open reasoning, in a person's right brain, the brain of insight. It's called the light of the Father. Umisham nimshach mispasha devina, and from the right brain, the energy goes and it spreads into the bina, the comprehension brain, which is in the left. Shehu asaga bebina. This is the idea of reaching ideas. Umavina shebemeach, umabina shebemeach, and from the left brain, nimshach ispalus amidus. From there is drawn the ability to make impact in the heart. The Hainu Malamed Beis Chadarim Shemamerach, there are actually, according to this, there are actually 32 rooms in the brain. I don't know if this is something that's physical.
Chamber. You can also use the word chambers.
Chambers of the brain. Shenikar Lamed Vech Shvilim de Bina. They are called the 32 paths of Bina. Shemispatchim liyes meichim lezah. That they actually become the brain of the emotions. In other words, to trigger emotions in appropriate moments. Because the brain is divided up into 4 parts. That's why the tefillin has on the head, you can see it has 4 parts. Chachma, bina, insight and comprehension. V'chesed v'gvura, and kindness and strictness. That's the kindness and the strictness is like connected with the fight or flight mode, which people are familiar with. Chesed means that you're going towards what you like. So v'chol echad yesh bedalet chadarim, and each one of these 4 has kol yesh b'ches chadarim, has 8. Shehu has 8 rooms, and 8 times 4 is 32, which means heart. And I believe those 8 functions are, it's like a binary code. There are 4 is Shem Havaya, Yud K Vav K, and another 4 is Shem Adnai, which makes 8 altogether. And they function slightly differently, all 8. And so we get 32 modes in the brain. And that's why the heart is called the heart. The love is love. Lave is like love. That's why it's called love, because it comes from the 32 rooms of the brain, 32 functions of the brain. Because it comes from the 32 like nerve paths, they're paths, neuropaths, that's what it is, which are basically 32 houses, and actually the das, which is the focus brain, has both functions of going towards things and running away from things or fighting things. So that das, mata seichel, it basically bends the light of the intellect. No, since I started to learn about radio waves, I'm able to understand why, much easier, why it calls the light of the intellect, because all radio waves are their line of sight. It's actually a form of light that we can't see with our physical eyes. It's all light. So he's saying that there's the light of the das, of the focus brain. It moves the seichel, the chesed, the chachma bina of the insight and comprehension, lispilus, that it should make impact, la chesed v'vura, either they should have kindness or strictness towards kalape schus. Either we should see merit or kalape chayv, or to see find fault. Shenikra gamke midas shabaseichel. These are basically emotions in the seichel, because the intellect is now obligating us to take motion. Now, there's a different way of counting this function. It's basically the 7 emotions of comprehension, and each one of those has another 7. So each 7 is brought down into 7. So 7 times 7 is 59. Add the idea of growth, and you have 49. Sorry, add the idea of growth, and you have 50. So this is the 50 gates of Bina. And by the way, so the 32 paths of insight, which 32 is lave, which is love, the idea of love, right? Because the love comes from understanding. That is the same idea as the 50 gates of comprehension. Well, what's the difference? The 50 gates of comprehension is what? What's the difference between the 50 gates of comprehension and the 32 paths of insight? He says because the 50 gates of comprehension, they stay in the mind, on the comprehension of the left brain. It's like kindness that's covered up inside the connective aspect of of connective aspect of the mother, which is the comprehension. Basically, the making impact of love to going towards things in the intellect, because the intellect moves us to vasaga edain nikra mechusa. It's still considered covered up. But Nelam Basaga, it's hidden in the understanding. There's a lot of people that they know something's wrong, but they still don't feel it, right? That's what we mean, that it's like covered up in the intellect. But however, if you make a breakthrough, it's a breakthrough emotion. The breakthrough emotion, it becomes love in the heart, shanikra zah, and then that's called zah. That's called zah. When the intellect, when the understanding breaks through to emotion. So too, these 32 paths, neuropaths, come beiskalos in a revealed way, from the hidden impact of the brain, lelev, and it moves to the heart. So the nun share bina, the 50 gates of bina, it still remains in the brain. But however, the 32 paths of wisdom, if there's a movement to the heart, it's a guaranteed movement. It's going to make impact. That's why the heart is called a heart. It's called a love. Like it's written in the tree of life. The reason why a heart is called love, love, because there are 32 neuropaths. There are 32 actually. What goes down the path? Light. The Abba, the Ema of the father and the mother, Shein Lamed Beis Shvilin, and this is 32 neuropaths. Shein Lamed Beis V'Yemer Elikim the Bina Shemekabel Ma'aba. In the act of creating the world, God, there were 32 times when God said, V'Yom Elikim, the Almighty said, right? What was happening these 32 times when the Almighty said in the act of creation? Basically, each path of insight and of comprehension was being activated to create a world, because we're being created, the mind, like ideas and imagination inside a mind. So too, we're inside of God. He's imagining us. Every aspect of these spheres are being activated, all 32 of them, to create our beautiful world. Like it's written in another place, Baruchas at length. Behold, Vadai, for sure, when there needs to be impact of an emotion in the heart, from the hidden impact in the brain, from the emotion, when it's still in the intellect, the binan comprehension of the mind, there first needs to be a contraction, and everything needs to hide, and there needs to be a squashing, which is basically a leaving. In other words, in order for the understanding of the mind to take on a different format, the understanding of the mind can't be dominant. And he gives, for example, the idea of a seed rotting, in order for there to be a change from potential growth to actual growth, and like it's known. And that's why a person needs a neck.
Could you just go back 1 second? The kid has to be, in order for the intellect, I explain what you said just before the parentheses.
If the intellect does not get pulled back, there will be never any space for transformation into emotion.
So if you think you know it all, you're definitely not going to learn more.
What?
If you think you know it all and you got it all figured out, then you're not going to be able to really understand things or learn more or grow.
And you also a person will be emotionally inept. Oh, I know everything. If the real understanding is when an emotion and an understanding also hits an emotion in the heart. But if a person's but even in a normal state, there needs to be a pullback. because otherwise there will never be a transformation into basic emotion. I'll say it in a different way. If in companies you have the people that um, that are R&D, research and development, but implementing that research and development, if anybody's worked on these teams, realize that a guy in a very short amount of time can come up with 10 years of research and development for a execution team. An execution team, I mean people that are going to get it done. It just takes so much longer. You have to really hold back. And these people that are used to getting things done and putting things organized, first things first, second things, like in construction, right? If you don't have everything done in the right order, you can't construct. So you actually have to hold back. You can't pour the concrete now before it's ready to be poured, because it's going to be a mess. You have to hold back. So the people that are into implementation know and understand the idea of scheduling and holding back. Because the ideas will just be overwhelming and nothing will get done, because you really need to slow down to get something done.
Thank you.
Yeah, and in the human body, the vessel that actually allows this is the neck. The neck is small. It's Metzar Goren, the bina. It's the thinness of the neck of the comprehension. So basically, what happens in the neck is that it basically blocks the excitement of the intellect and allows it's basically a cable that allows a transformation in format. That's Shinoi Amahus. The format is transformed. Then now it can become an emotional movement. So the neck, by being physically thin, that matches the spiritual energy that the neck has to limit the format, to allow transformational format from intellect to emotion. And there's actually a few of these membranes in the human body that allow for change of format. Just like you have the membrane around the brain. Basically what the membrane does is it actually has a spiritual aspect that it blocks. It stops a higher power that is higher than intellect, love, and it allows a transformational format into the light of intellect. Otherwise, a person's mind will just be overwhelmed. It's like squelch on a radio. There's so much electromagnetic noise that you may not be able to hear the message. So you need you need ways to be able to block extra things, extra noise. So that's what the membrane around the brain does. It actually has a spiritual effect. And also the diaphragm, the diaphragm above the liver, it separates and makes a distinction between the rest breathing system, to the digestion system, the food system, because it actually allows for transformation of function. It takes things into a different format, from air into the format of blood and the hormones that move around in blood. So even though you have these changes of formats, nevertheless, the emotions of the heart, they're really similar. They're really a model of the midah shebaseichel, of the emotions in the intellect itself, mamish. It's like a map. That's how similar they are. The way the mind it gets excited And that's the same way it works in the heart without the smallest change. Even the point of a yud, the smallest letter, it's not going to deviate from that. Like it's known. It's just that's the different format. You have in radios, you have a DMR, which is a digital radio, which is basically there's a digital signal being sent from the radios, right? But a human doesn't understand digital. So the radio changes the format to analog that a person can actually listen and understand it. But it gets sent over the waves, in radio waves, in a digital format. And there's some advantages in doing that. And that's similar. That's a metaphor of what's happening between the brain and the heart. There is a change of format. Bagbala, and there's also a limiting. There's a limitations with tzimtzum, and there's also a focus. Bebechinas netzach v'hoid, the bina, basically the two emotions of yes and no. I'm going to call that yes and no. The yes and no of comprehension, shu shlichus shefa hasaga, basically it has to be a simple message in order, if you want to implement it, it's yes or no. So basically sending the energy, the sustenance of the comprehension, be'etzem, in the essential comprehension, bishvil ispalas amida, and changing it into the format of yes and no in order to, there could be a emotional movement, levad, alone, right? The message to the emotional movement needs to be simple: yes or no. When you go and when you stop, you do it like it's known. And by the way, we've learned that in the emotions of the heart, there's three levels. There's Chabad, Chagas, Nahi. Even in emotions, there's the intellectual, the more of the feeling, and then there's the movement. That's Nahi. A different way of saying this is muskal means the intellect, which is the driver, which is the trigger that tells us when to trigger the emotion, when not to trigger the emotion. How do you evaluate the situation? Which emotion is appropriate? That's the muskal. Murgash means the feeling, the emotion. Umutba means the nature, the response, the natural response. And by the way, besides having these three formats in the heart, even each of these three formats have three formats: beginning, middle, and end, internal, intermediate, and external canal, like we've explained above barichas at length. Now we're saying the message of the oneness, the higher oneness. Even the external vessels of the Nehi Shebelev, of the transaction aspect of the heart, which is basically the lungs, because they are Netzach and Hoid. Each one of the lungs corresponds to that emotion of Netzach Hoid. Yesod would be the tract in the middle, but Netzach Hoid, it's the most external aspect of the respiratory system, which is the right and left lung, which basically the lungs feel the idea of going towards something and loving something, and the movement that and from the wind in the lungs, which is the most external aspect of the heart. That's what is going to be delivered to other people when you're speaking. That breath. And that breath in Kabbalah code, Shunikra Nihi the Chazeh. It's called the Nihi, the Netzach Yesod, the yes, no, and connection of the chest. And it's going to become Machshava Dibra Maisa from the breath of your lungs. That is going to power the thought, speech, and action. This is the external vessels of the heart. The external vessels means the lungs. Is basically the emotional response, which is in the air of the chest, the zah of really, for the it's a metaphor for zah of Atzilus, the small faces of Atzilus, the higher man of Atzilus. And on this we say, God and his limits and his vessels are one. Because it's actually not an actualized limit. It's still infinite. It's just the possibility to limit. We're going to use the metaphor of a lower man, us. When a person's essential want that's around the body, the yechida, that's in a person's like aura as far as he can stretch his hand, and now like we've mentioned, aura means like light. Meir uba so that light from the yechida goes through the liquid around the brain and then starts to shine up the brain, the chesed, the chochmah bina, in the inside and comprehension of the brain, until it goes down and becomes more of a simple intellect. Katan Sameichin means small mindedness, simple intellect. The kli, the netzav v'choid, we said the netzav v'choid, the chesed, and it goes into the vessel of the right and left lung. Netzach and hoid, yes, no, of kindness. A murgash, which is experienced, shubalev, in the heart. Shuba hevel achazel, it's actually in the air, in the composition of the air inside the lungs. Harigam sham arotan meir, over there inside the air of the lungs, the person's want shines. Kianuraim, because we see sheba hevel halev, in the air of the lungs, of the respiratory system of the heart, because the heart is really everything. Murgesh harotzen, we feel the want of a person. Nikra rusa deliba, and this want that we feel in our lungs is called ru'usa deliba, the want of the heart, as it extends into the lungs. Mashaliba chafetz, this that a person's heart wants, b'murgash, in an experience, l'davar tov, in an experiential way, to a good thing. V'limais, and the limais, and to feel disgust, beheder, with a lack of want, believe in the heart, l'davarah, to a bad thing, hasanui, chulu, that's hateful to the essence of the person. Im kain, so now what you see in this metaphor, there's a oneness, umiskasher, and there's a connection, mimokar aratan atzmi, from the source of the essential wants, ad hevel alev, till the wind in the heart, which is the lungs. Bregam achad, in one moment, there's a direct connection. Kilu muhus achad mamish, as if it's one essence just moving. And this is really we can help us imagine lahavin, to understand Badam Alien, in the higher man, which is God, the way he chooses to express himself to us. This is called Zah, the law of Bechinas Leiv, the Zah, and the heart of Zah, the heart of the emotions of Atzilus Nemar. On it says, Vayomer El Libay. God spoke to his heart. God has a heart? No, we're speaking about what's going on in Zah of Atzilus. Latos Lechesed. He's deciding to turn towards kindness. Also, when it says in the Bible, he became depressed on his heart. God has a heart. Depression? No, what it means, means that the essence of God is turning the external aspect of Zah towards judgment. For Kahai Gavna and similar expressions, we understand what they mean now. The external vessels of the Netzach and Haid, which is the yes and no of the heart, which is in the two right and left lungs. In there shines the want apashut, which is simple, ha'atzmi, which is in the essence, in the essence of the unlimited infinite light that was before the Tzimtzum Rishon. Now this is what a yichud is. What we're learning is the book of unity. Well, we are making a unity, a mental unity, because we're connecting to the essence of what God wants before the first contraction is connected to the most external emotion, like God speaking to his heart, right? It's all one with the essence. And this is what was mentioned in the 10th chapter. What's before it's before Tzimtzum? 3 levels. Yachid, Echad, and Kadmon. Yachid was the God's essence. Echad was when we know what the building blocks are, even though they haven't been measured. And Kadmon means God already measured everything out, how he's going to create the world. And we gave the metaphor over there in chapter 10. When God wants to perform kindness in his essence, in the essence, like a human, in the essence of his soul, it connects up all the way down to the most basic emotions. Most simple emotions that a human feels is connected with their essence of the soul. So the same thing in God. Whatever we're going to experience in this world is directly connected with God's essence. That is seeing the higher oneness. Until the external aspect of the heart of Zoh, it's still considered the end of the world of the infinite, because God and his vessels that he chooses to make for himself are one. Just like in a human, his heart and his want in his essence is one. There's a total congruency between the most basic level and external aspect of a person's love and what they want in their heart. It's connected all the way to a person's essence, and there's no separation between the two. It goes directly, they flow one from another. So therefore, it's not the various emotions that we experience are not in addition to the essence of God. They're an expression of the essence of God. And this is a chapter that's worth going over. And next week, we're actually going to have a summary. We're actually going to have a summary of all the chapters till now. So it's very fundamental, very basic and very fundamental what we've learned in this chapter. Basically, you can review chapter 10 and chapter 32. Chapter 10 and 32, chapter 10 and 32, to make the higher oneness connection.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi Chyrek. Beautiful. Okay. We're going to pause now. We'll say a few words of the parsha.